Greetings and welcome back. We are in Senior English B, and we are working with Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and that's where we're going to now go back to, and our goal now is to finish our comments on Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Interestingly, I say interestingly, maybe you will find it interesting as well, I'm going to begin on page 833 out of your hymnal, which actually isn't the poem itself, but rather an image that's taken from the poem. And when you look at it, we can use this for exam prep. You should have your annotations in front of you over Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And I'm interested to see if, without looking at any part of the poem, only by looking at that picture, you can get any sense of what part of the poem we're in. Write it down. So you're looking at 833. This, by the way, is a drawing made by a famous artist. It's an engraving. His name was Gustav Dore, D-O-R-E. And these images that you've been seeing are all from him. 1875, by the way, is the date, if you'd like to write it down too. That's when these engravings were done. This poem becomes so important, so remarkably successful, that lots and lots of people were inspired to do all kinds of artwork from it. What do you make of this picture? If, for example, you didn't know anything about this picture, what would you concentrate on first? Okay, there's some guy sitting where? Where is he sitting? Right, he's sitting on the front of a boat. Front of the back, either one, right? And notice the mast's sails are down. Why are the sails down? They ain't no wind. And what's behind him in the water? Dude, what is that? Yeah, he's got all kinds of beasts from the water, right? Magical, beautiful beasts we're going to hear. And then we start to pay attention. See, at first glance, you almost don't see it. I've had students look at this picture and go, oh yeah, I didn't see that. On his chest, something is hanging from around his neck. There's the bird. There's the albatross hanging around his neck. Then there's the look on his face. What is the look on his face? Can you come up with a single adjective to describe the look on his face? It's the oh poop look. What is that look on his face? What's a good adjective for that? Despair. Keep going. Despair. The oh crap moment. Defeat. Keep going. There is an interesting word. I want you to write it in your notes because it's a word which captures in many ways the theme of much of this poem, and that is the theme of and the feeling of remorse. Now, what does that word mean, remorse? You regret. You've done something, and now you understand. Bad idea. Only, important, remorse often this way, you can't undo it. See, we could quickly jump to 3A and I could ask you, in the first 20 years of your life, can you write down one event that for you, now, you look back and you got the look on this guy's face? Now you look back, you have this look. You can't undo it. You can't undo it. But you definitely have that feeling of remorse, that feeling of, man, if I could go back and do it again, I definitely would not shoot that stupid albatross with my crossbow. Because, well, all these other things are kind of, tangential to it, right? Now, I ended my last session with you by asking a couple of questions. I want to go back to those in part 7. So I'm with you on page 845. 844, 845. At the end of our poem, the storyteller comes to a conclusion. He will say, since then, I'm on page 844. Since then, at an uncertain hour, are you all reading with me? I'm at line roughly, 583 or something like that. Since then, at an uncertain hour, that agony returns, and till my ghastly tale is told, This heart within me burns. The old man says, I pass like night from land to land. I have strange power of speech. That moment that his face I see, I know the man that must hear me. To him my tale I teach. What has he just said? This is an interesting thing he's just said. Only certain people get my story. Not everybody. I only tell this story to certain people. How does he know who he's supposed to tell the story to? He just knows by looking at them, at their face. I look at them, and I somehow have a sense, this is somebody who needs to hear my story. See, notice in my Warp Tour example, the old guy who grabs you, homeless guy who grabs you, notice he doesn't say a word to the other two people you're with. And they just go on, right? They leave you. They abandon you to this old homeless guy, right? And it's then left to you to hear the story, right? Notice he says, it's almost like I have to tell the story before I can finally relax again. And then all of a sudden, it starts to build up. And I got to find somebody else to tell my story to. Notice he says, what loud uproar bursts from that door? The wedding guests are there. This is actually Coleridge, of course, telling the story. And in the garden bower, the bride and bridesmaids singing are, and hark the little vesper bell, which biddeth me to prayer. In other words, you have options here. One option is go in and party. Another option is go and, say a prayer. O wedding guest, this soul hath been alone on a wide, wide sea. So lonely 'twas that God himself scarce seemed there to be. So the first thing that he says, now we're getting to the what you're supposed to learn from this poem part of the poem, okay? What are you supposed to learn from this story? The first thing he says is, dude, I've known what it's like to be alone. Alone on a wide, wide sea. Even alone, so alone that maybe who wasn't there? Even God wasn't there. Now, immediately we can recognize, there's a whole lot of metaphor going on in this poem. What do I mean by metaphor? One thing represents something else. You got it. So, for example, you could be alone stuck on a boat, or you could be alone in any other number of ways. We can ask this 3B question. In your life, number one moment you felt the most alone. Some of you would write down in a secure moment where nobody else could see it. And you would have to admit, ironically, that was not a moment when you were alone in terms of nobody around. In fact, some of you would write down, I have all kinds of people around me during that moment. Everybody's asking me, dude, are you okay? What's going on? What's going on? You had everybody wanting to know, but you were completely alone. Right? We might say what? Psychologically, spiritually, alone. Alone, alone on a wide, wide sea. The old man will say, I know what it's like to be totally alone. Out of the experience, what has he learned? Well, let's keep going. Oh, sweeter than the marriage feast. What is better than partying? 'Tis sweeter far to me to walk together to the church, the kirk, with a goodly company. To walk together to the kirk and all together pray, while each to his great Father bends, old men and babes and loving friends and youths and maidens gay. Interesting. You have the option of either going to the party or what? Going to church to what? Pray. Which one is better, does he say? Going to the church to pray is better than going to the party, he says. What would lead him to say something like that? Killing the albatross was an impromptu moment for him that was kind of like the feeling you have getting ready to go into Warp Tour. In other words, excitement, right? That certain kind of dangerous joy. Dude, I think I can shoot that bird out of the air. Let's see if I can do it. Impromptu, right? Thoughtless. when you go to the church to pray, you have to be full of thoughts. So in other words, we're making a distinction here, aren't we? Two ways to live your life. One, kind of thoughtless. You just do what you do. Thoreau says the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, is how he says it in Walden. Very similar concept, right? Or you can live your life thoughtful, reflective. Farewell, farewell. All right, the very end. Now he's going to leave. The old man's going to leave. Farewell, farewell. But this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest, he prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. Okay, you just read it, so now you get to write down a couple of notes. There it is. That's the message to this poem. He's telling it to you right now. Go back and take a look at it. 2 stanzas, right? We've got those 8 lines. What is it that he has said? What is the message of this poem? He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. What's the message? What is the message from this little poem? This strange story about, dude, when I was a young kid, I went out on a boat with a bunch of sailors, 200 other guys, and we got caught in some ice, and I jacked this albatross, and we hit the doldrums, and all 200 guys died. Then there's this weird thing that happened to me where they all came back to life and animated just enough to be able to get me back home. And then I nearly drowned. And then I was found by this hermit priest guy and this captain and his son, and I made it back to land. And then all of a sudden he says, this is what you're supposed to learn. He prayeth best that loveth best all things, both great and small. For the dear God that loveth us, he made and loveth all. What's the point? And by the way, this is a profoundly romantic insight. It's a very important romantic intuition. It can be best phrased this way. All life is precious. It's important. All life. Not only the big things, but even the very little things. All life is important. Now, this line has, of course, been much debated over the years. Of course, the question then is, when should life ever be taken? Right? Because life lives on life, correct? It seems fairly obvious, though, that the old man is saying, whatever you do, treat all life with, what's the R word? You got it. That's the romantic intuition. Treat all life with reverence or respect. In other words, see that there is an importance to showing respect to all life. The mariner, now to finish, back to the lines that we were talking about yesterday. The mariner, whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, this means that he has an old white beard, is gone. And now the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He turns away from the party. He walks away from Warped Tour. He went like one that hath been stunned and is of sense forlorn. A sadder and a wiser man, he rose the morrow morn. Now, we're going to try and answer 2 questions right now for your notes. You're going to use these probably in your paper as well. Question 1. After this whacked out story about this guy that shoots his bird, right? The kid doesn't feel like going to the party anymore. He walks away from the party. He is so excited to go to the party. He was so excited that when the old man started telling him his story, he was like hitting on his chest, like, dude, would you like hurry up? But by the end of this story, something is changed for him. Why does he walk away from the party? What do you think it is that leads him from this story to decide to walk away from the party? This is just a dumb story about an old fart that got, a long time ago when he was young, and he killed this stupid bird. By the way, right after that albatross that was hanging around his neck in that picture, he sees those beautiful animals in the ocean. We're told he blesses them unaware, which means he talks about how beautiful they are. And the moment that happens, three things happen. The albatross, the dead bird, falls off of his neck into the ocean. It starts to rain. Now all of a sudden he can finally get a drink. And he can sleep. He hasn't been able to sleep. So we got all kinds of interesting symbolism going on there. Why would the kid walk away from the party? I don't understand. Then we're told the next morning he wakes up, but he's two things. Sadder, but he's wiser. Why do those two things often go together? Why is it that often when we get wiser, we also get sadder? And what is it that keeps this kid from wanting to go to the party anymore? What has changed for him? Can you say it? What do you think, Francis? Like, what's changed for this kid, do you think? Why all of a sudden he doesn't care about the party anymore? How come? It's just a dumb story about a guy who killed a bird. Who cares? I don't get it. And the party's just now getting ripped up. I mean, he's ready to go. He should be. Like, why? I don't get it. Why? It's just a dumb story about a guy who killed a bird. What has changed, Kroger, for this kid?
Is it that he went from innocence to experience?
Oh, let's use Blake for a second. Now, see, notice that Kroger's going to take us to a 3A observation. Remember, another romantic writer. And Kroger's going to say it this way. It's a brilliant way to say it. In the moment of listening to this story, the kid went from innocence to experience. And in the process of going from innocence to experience, things that mattered to him before, like having a good time partying, all of a sudden don't seem to matter as much to him anymore. I don't understand. How could that happen from a dumb story about a guy that shot a bird? The kid begins to recognize that the story is kind of a metaphor. What do I mean by that? A metaphor. It's like a symbol. Symbol of what? A symbol of what? Makes the young kid do what in regards to his life? I have a lot of seniors that go, oh, now I kind of start to understand why they teach this to seniors, this poem to seniors. You start looking back over your life. You start thinking about the events of your life. You start thinking about the thoughtless actions of your life. When you killed an albatross and the ripple effects were not so good. Lots of negative energy occurred because of some action you committed that you cannot undo. There ain't no going back. Can you think about one action in your freshman year you committed you'd like to undo, but you just can't? But the effects might still be there. Ripple effects might still be there. And, oh, thanks a lot, Mr. McGee. I totally forgotten about it. A negative experience, an embarrassing experience, a humiliating experience, whatever that is. I totally forgotten about it. Now all of a sudden you remind me of it. Thanks a lot. Why does he wake up the next morning sadder and wiser? Why do those two things often go together? Dude, I just brought up something from your 9th grade year. And even though some of you might say things like, who cares? Maybe a little bit deeper you find yourself going, yeah, well then how come I still have a strange feeling when I think about it if I don't care? Because I do care. And because it bugs me that my actions killed the bird and caused the negative energy to ensue. And in that moment, now I'm right back there again. With wisdom seems to come a certain kind of sadness. Go back to 10 Turn Abbey real quickly. And I'd like you to take a look at some lines from 10 Turn Abbey that we saw, but maybe we didn't see. I'm on page 783. Wordsworth is talking about what it was like when he was young. That time has passed, he says. It's all over. I'm at line 83 or 84 or so. That time has passed, he says, and all it's when being young. Aching joys are now no more. What was it like to be a freshman? There it is. Aching joys. Aching joys, right? Are now no more. Notice he says that for him, all it's dizzy raptures. It's like when you're a freshman, it's like being on a top, spinning, 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 spinning. Not for this faint eye nor more, no murmur. I don't want to go back. Other gifts have followed for such loss. I would believe abundant recompense. Recompense means repayment. In other words, I don't want to go back to my freshman year and have to relive that stupid thing I did that brought so much negative energy. But now I realize in a moment I've changed. I'm not the same person I was 4 years ago. Not the same. Really, what's changed? I've learned to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes, there it is, the still sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. And I felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts. This young man who wants to go to the party finds himself having to think elevated thoughts. Thoughts of a different kind. And in that moment, he's wiser. But he's also sadder. Do you think it's possible that maybe he was recognizing the albatross that he shot, the albatross that was hung around his neck? What's the metaphor for the albatross around your neck? What's that mean? Your reflections on the past, the events, the things you've done that you feel still remorse for. How does he get rid of that albatross? He has a new sight. What is that new sight? Literally, he sees the beauty. Yeah, he sees the beauty, and he gives respect to those beautiful things, and immediately the albatross falls away from his neck. Right? So you have all kinds of interesting metaphoric, symbolic elements happening in this, what will, in the English Romantic tradition, become a really famous poem. It becomes a very popular, famous poem. Okay, so there you go. That's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Questions, comments, observations, concerns of any kind?